And here we are live. Thanks for coming today, everyone. We are live with Building Without Barriers. I am Julie Sawchuk, and today we have a guest, Jane Vorbrodt, and she's coming to us from Vancouver. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here. There we go. Hello. And we're on my accessible front porch. I was going to sit on the back patio, but I wasn't entirely sure what the sun was going to be doing. So we're here instead where we have a bit of shade. And I'm talking to Jane about accessibility and beauty because you can do both. And that's why I decided to sit out here because it is a beautiful front porch. And I want to start by thanking my fashion sponsor, which is our Pick-a-Posy costume company here in Blythe. Jennifer has been kind enough to provide me with a variety of outfits. It was actually kind of hard to pick today what I was going to wear. So I'm going to welcome our guest, and I'm going to introduce you to her. Whoops, I guess I better do that. There she is, Jane Vorbrodt, coming from Vancouver. Jane, mid-morning there. And I want to just tell you guys how Jane and I met. That was April 2018. So we have been hanging out together for quite a while, virtually across the country, working on various projects. But what drew me to Jane the first time we met was it was in our Rick Hansen certification professional course that we did out in Vancouver. And Jane was working on starting a project for her cousin, building, renovating a home so that it would be accessible to her. And that was at the point where we were just working on our plans for this house, and I had no idea what I was doing. And so hearing Jane introduce herself to the group and talk about the project that she was working on for her cousin, I went, oh, she knows stuff. and Jane is, so Jane's an architect. Jane has her own architecture company, and her focus is on accessibility, and especially for family homes, aside from all of the big projects that she's done. But Jane and I have just developed this working relationship where we have been able to help all sorts of people. And we're going to get to talking about that. But Jane, can you just give us a little bit of a story about that project that you did for your cousin?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Jane, and I don't have a fashion sponsor, by the way. I'm sitting in my basement and I'm wearing what I always wear. And like the project. Yeah. So Julie and I had this interesting connection because we were both working on accessibility projects, both of us kind of for the first time. Like when I took that on, like I had to learn everything I could. And like, that's why I took that course with Julie, like just trying to absorb. And, but we both had totally different, kind of constraints to deal with. Julie lives in the country. She has a farm. She has tons of space. She could build something where there's like acres of room in the house where she can maneuver around and do whatever she wants. And that wasn't the issue. And whereas for me, the project for my cousin, the footprint was tiny. We were packing in all of this program into a very small footprint because we're in the city. Real estate is insanely expensive. Construction is insanely expensive. So it was kind of neat to see, like, how do you, like, just to compare. And also, yeah, so that was neat to have those projects happening at the same time.
And that was an existing building too, right? Which provides all sorts of additional constraints in terms of having enough space. What was the room? You call it program, but what was the room or the space in that house that was the trickiest?
Well, honestly, with that house, so it's a heritage house. It's from about 1910. I don't think a single wall in that house has remained the way it was. Like, it was completely reconstructed. In Vancouver, we have very strict zoning regulations. And so we used the shell so that we could keep the amount of square footage on the site. And we put 3 units into it. So it was all about creating 3 units so that different family members could live together in a house, but have their own space. So that was an interesting challenge. And then to put an elevator that connected the 3. And yeah, like all these things to like give each unit 2 bedrooms so that each unit, the occupant could have like a caregiver or a roommate or the luxury of having an office space within the unit. So a lot of like accessible units you see, it's like 1 bedroom, no provision for caregivers. It's almost like the designers, or when they're planned out, it's just like no one imagines the person with disabilities beyond the person with disabilities, like the family, the caregivers. So
yeah, their community of support, right? And
yeah,
oftentimes that is totally necessary. And it's something that we don't talk about too, right? And needing help, and that it's okay to need help, and not everybody can function independently. Independence, though, for me in my space has been, it was a real priority in the design. And gosh, I've had quite a few conversations actually with students lately, some of the high school students that I've been working with. And one of them was wondering why we chose to stay in the country versus live in the city. And for me, that was, it was a tough decision, because there's like, with living in Vancouver, there's so many more opportunities for recreation and all of that kind of thing. But for me, it was about being able to be out in the country and have the space and the beauty. And just my front door as an example, I'll move out of the way. No step, right? You can have a front entry that is beautiful, and it doesn't have to look accessible. If you were to come up to my house, you would just see it as a regular house. And Jane and I have these conversations all the time, right? How do you make an accessible space beautiful? Jane, what did you do? Give me an example of a project, or tell us about a project where you really have made it happen to look good.
Well, I guess when I think about design, I don't differentiate the design piece. I don't differentiate an accessible versus a non-accessible project. Like, I feel like the design process should be equal, the same, as exciting. And so with an accessibility project, you're just listening more to a client, like, and what they need. And every project you learn a little bit more and become more aware of issues as they come up. So
yeah, listening's a really big part of it, right? And understanding the needs, and not being afraid to ask those questions about, you know, what is it that you really are after?
Yeah, like, I guess like a design process with any project, there's sort of a fun creative stage where you're collecting inspiration. And a lot of people use Pinterest. Like, I feel like Pinterest, in a way, it's great. Like, it's nice that it's a very accessible resource for people to be able to like dive in. But I do find that a lot of people just kind of want to copy what everyone else has. But anyway, you start with like lots of really inspiring images, and then see how you can then integrate the accessibility needs, which accessibility needs is often revolves around turning radius and the space that you need for all the different functions. So if there's a way, like when you have a compact space, like you do typically in Vancouver, how can you like bunch together, you take one turning radius, how can you combine functions so that you're not having to replicate that turning radius multiple times?
Right.
Like, how can you make it maximum efficient? And I think I've heard you talk about this idea in the past, like how it's great how you have all this space, but almost too much space.
Yeah, sometimes I
Like,
feel that way. I do. And I know now that, we're all at home, right? The kids are at home and we're often in like the kitchen, for example, all together. And I can get around everybody and not roll over toes and get around the dishwasher. And all of that has been very important as we are all home together. But I know down the road that need for space will change. Now, we did make the island in the kitchen so that it actually can move closer to the other side of the kitchen. So we can make that space. But I've had to work into my cooking, for example, being more efficient with going to one place, collecting all of the things that I need, putting them on my lap board, and then going on to do whatever work I was going to do. For those of you that are watching, you may or may not know, Jane is the artist behind Building Better Bathrooms. And one of the things that I love about Jane is her ability to see something in her head and bring it to life. And Jane, I'm going to surprise you with this. Jane doesn't know that this is coming, but this is one of the very first test drawings of Building Better Bathrooms in the shower setup. And Jane, we started with these like hardcore, whatever, is it AutoCAD or whatever?
It's called SketchUp. We use SketchUp. I guess, how many illustrations did we end up having in the book?
My
like
goodness.
20 something?
Yeah. Oh, at least. Mm-hmm.
At least. So we set up all these little vignettes in SketchUp. And so we were working, the three of us, Julie, Samantha, and myself, and we'd call every week. And I would share my screen on the SketchUp model with all these little vignettes. And so that was the one that Julie showed, was the one for the shower.
And it was great because we could take that then and like look at it from a 365-degree view of, which way do we want to show what this bathroom looks like. But what Jane did with that then is she created drawings that have personality, and they really do come through when you see the drawings in the book itself. And this is the final version of that shower drawing and all of the intricacies of the labels, but you'll notice that there's no numbers in the drawing. Jane, talk to us about why we decided not to have those numbers.
Yeah, because we wanted the illustrations to be really clear, because I think one can be overwhelmed with data. And so Samantha, being the code brain of our group, she really was able to really help us get those numbers into a spreadsheet that's separate from the drawing. So
yeah, that's what this looks like here.
Yeah. So with the drawings, we felt as a group that having more of a hand-drawn feel just was more representative of our group, really. Our book is meant to provide suggestions. It's like a starting point. It's not saying this is how it has to be. It's like, consider this as a starting point. So we felt that having it a little bit more of a hand-drawn experience made it clear that this was not final. And I don't know if that's what we achieved, but it was also more fun to draw.
Well, that's what I wanted you to talk about, was because you had so much fun doing the drawing. Once you figured out what process you were going to use and you incorporated using your iPad and actually drawing by hand to get back to your roots, right? Because you are an artist at your roots.
Yes, I did go to art school a long time ago, and it's really fun to I did an undergrad in drawing. So and unfortunately, the way it works when you're an architect, you end up doing everything on the computer, and you move farther and farther and farther away from actually drawing. We sketch by hand, but nothing finished, really. So But I started out drawing by hand, like actually with a pen on paper, and I realized this is not going to work because our designs for the book changed like hundreds of times.
Every 10 minutes they changed.
Right to the very last second. When we were ready to print, it was like, okay, like we have to do some more changes. So it wasn't working for me to draw on paper because like I'd have to redraw 1,000 times. Whereas on the iPad, like this was the first time I ever used an iPad for drawing. And I think the technology has improved so much that you actually feel like you're drawing, but you can delete it and you can like undo. So for me, this was like revolutionary. So I was like, you know, I could make changes and still have that hand-drawn look without having to like, it was kind of a neat process. Because
I've leaned on you for doing a lot of drawing, and in some of the projects where I have been like, I gotta get this out of my head, but I don't know how to do that. And the one kitchen in particular that I'm thinking of is the apartment building in the SketchUps for this, you know, proposed apartment building in Exeter, and trying to make that kitchen from a regular, you know, single bedroom kind of not huge space and making it accessible. And Jane, like, you took that drawing and you just went, and it went accessible. And it was so helpful to have the connection of, you know, your artistic ability and your out of the box thinking, and it just,
but that's what's so fun to work together, because like if I were to just design it by myself, like it's not the same as designing with Julie because we work together and we send stuff back and forth, and then we get onto our video call and hash it out, because like Julie's like, well, where are you going to put this and how are you going to move to that? And it makes me learn and understand, and yeah, super fun. So
and our passion comes out when we do these projects together. And
yeah,
I think I have used this term before in terms of building better bathrooms, right? That it was really a passion project that started for us. You know, maybe it even started in April of 2018 when we first met and started working together, and met Samantha at the same time. And that's the thing about the book, is that really we just want to help people understand how to make bathrooms into better spaces, and that they don't have to be institutional looking, and that providing accessibility doesn't mean that it has to look ugly. And I debated about whether we would meet today outside or inside. And, you know, I was thinking about meeting in the bathroom again, because my bathroom, you know, it's orange, it's fun. I've got art on the walls, and it doesn't really take much to make a space from accessible institutional to fun. Oh, it's accessible, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of people, like when they hear that I focus on accessible design, immediately imagine some like depressing grab bars and like sort of medical equipment.
Yes.
And so I feel like it's our job to like teach people like, no, it's like just those are aspects of it, yes, but like that should not be the starting point. Like, so
yeah, I don't know why grab bars are always the thing that people latch onto, literally, figuratively, no pun intended, whatever.
Well, I think we need to like design a really exciting grab bar product that like looks really cool or something.
Products. Let's not start talking about products, because we don't have time today to talk
Yeah.
about products.
No.
Because
Another time.
there's a lot to talk about. There is definitely a lot to talk about. You know what? I meant to upload so that I could share with you some of the drawings that some of the students have been doing. So in the Building Without Barriers high school program, the specialist high skills major that I'm running here in Ontario, Jane helped me draw up the final assignment, which is to modify a hotel room. And I meant to upload them. Jane, I'll share them with you, and maybe I'll post some of them on my Instagram. Actually, that's a really good idea. I'll do that so that you can see some of the work that the students have been doing to modify the bathroom and to make the hotel room accessible and safe. I'm just blown away by these kids. They're 16, 17, maybe 18 years old, and they spend a day with me and the program, and then they tour my house, and then they have to take this motel room that is not accessible. It's got like a double sink and a tub and this narrow door, and they make plans to change it up to make it accessible. And it's so fun to see their drawings. And some of the kids are actually using SketchUp to show what their drawings would look like. It's
great.
It's pretty neat to see them and to hear the questions that they have. And the young kids, they're interested.
I think it's like that is like as our role as like getting the word out for us to get like students in high school, in universities to start thinking about all this stuff right away, to notice like when they stay in a hotel or they're out in the world, like to notice like, oh, like how do people get around? Can they get around? Like, like I think we need to I think what you're doing with students now is amazing, and I'm hoping to do some stuff with universities as well to get students like aware.
Yeah, because when we can teach them to put on their accessibility lenses, right, and even just wear them all the time, not just to put them on every once in a while, they will start to do that whole, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Yes. And it just becomes a part of the way they do their work. And I think working with students as they go into design and construction, whatever their role may be, when they start young, it's like in the 1980s when we started recycling, right? They taught the kids about recycling and about saving the environment and all of that was happening. We can do the same thing, but through the lens of accessibility. And that's one of the reasons why our passion project, our Building Better Bathrooms, we just want people to start sharing and, understanding the way that things have been done with their bathrooms in the past hasn't always worked, and we've been missing the mark. So I guess we're asking our listeners, wouldn't you say, Jane? We're asking our listeners to help us get the word out there that here is finally a good resource for them to use to build better bathrooms.
Yeah, I think like the book manages to communicate some of the stories about why we're like, before I did my first accessibility project like 5 years ago, as an architect, I just followed building code. And I thought, I didn't even think about how those spaces were used. I just followed code, and that's still how a lot of people just view an accessible bathroom in a project as plop in the stuff that the inspector's going to look for or the plan checkers, and we're good. Well, right. No. So, and I didn't know that until we took our course, like in 2018. And so, yeah, we were trying to bridge that, like, okay, yeah, like code, but there's so much beyond that. So much. So
code, but
there's humans that are using these spaces.
Exactly.
And you need to understand how those humans are using the spaces so that you can make it actually work.
Yeah. And
not just be code compliant.
Yeah. If Samantha were here talking with us, she would be saying what's the intent behind the code? And that's what we're doing, is we're trying to help people understand what the intent of, in terms of, for example, grab bar setup or turning circle, right? And looking at all bodies, right? Because all bodies are different in terms of size and ability and function, and being able to put that into your Rolodex of information of people that are going to be using your buildings, or clients that you're going to be working with. We need to think about every body, literally. Yeah.
So, a project like in your own home, you can design it for exactly your body, or you and your family's bodies. But if you're designing a bathroom for a community center or like a school or whatever, you're designing it for as many people as you can. So kind of different, but yeah.
And that is something that I think is relatively recent in my sort of light bulb moments, is that in a sense, it's easier to design for something that is like a commercial space, but it's also challenging. It has its own challenges. But when you're making decisions from a personal space, the thinking forward, what's my body going to be able to do or not be able to do 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road even, it actually makes those decisions harder to make, wouldn't you say? I know you have some experience working with different families and trying to make their spaces accessible for now, for everybody, and for the future. What kind of questions have people asked you about those kinds of situations?
What questions do people ask me? Well, the thing is, I find it's more the other way around. I try to ask people questions because I think people don't realize, like, the more they tell me, the more I can help them.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot of, it's sad, but I think people feel shame or because they're just so used to that, like, especially when it comes to bathrooms, like they don't immediately want to tell me how they use their space. And that's a bit challenging and like it's a bit tricky for me because like how do you get that information? But yeah, like the more you know, the more you think about how something will be used, the more you can put thought into but I guess like there's a lot of things you can do to prepare for the future without knowing as well, like the space, the ability to put grab bars or assistive devices anywhere, like if you have power and you have reinforcing,
and you power and reinforcing,
set it up to be able to adjust as needed over time. I think are the keys with an accessible bathroom.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also harder from an individual design perspective because the potential financial implications are more so. But right, there's always that but doing it now will save you money versus doing it down the road. And backing and electrical that you just mentioned, those are the two big things, right? Because if you back behind everywhere where you might maybe down the road put a grab bar, if you do that in the construction process, then you don't have to pull the drywall down. If you've got electrical where you need it to be now and potentially down the road, like in the ceiling, for example, in my bathroom, that's what we did. If you've got it there, if you're down to the studs or you're building from scratch, put the electrical in now. It will cost you cents and it will save you time and money and effort and cleanup and all of that hassle down the road, right? Forethought, so important.
Yeah.
Well, we are just about out of time. Jane, thank you so much for hanging out with me today on my front porch and doesn't matter that you're in your basement. It's so great.
No.
It's
I
just
feel
great.
like I'm on your porch with you. So
Well, you know what? I was kind of thinking we look like we're sitting side by side. So
yeah.
someday we'll get to do that, right?
Yeah.
You can
I
find
hope so.
Jane at Kuno Architecture on Instagram. We would love for everybody to visit our Building Better Bathrooms Facebook page, where are we, Jane? Our Instagram,
Yeah.
and our LinkedIn as well. You can find our Building Better Bathrooms there. If you're interested in building without barriers, that's what I just had up there. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel and find me on Instagram. Thanks again for hanging out today. Next week, if you're watching live today, next week, I'm changing the time to noon. So please join me at 12 o'clock from now on Fridays. I double booked myself, which is silly. Anyways, have a great day, everyone, and tune in next week where we'll be talking to the COO of the Federal Bridge Corporation about their decisions and positive action to making their spaces more accessible for their employees and for everybody that's being welcomed into Canada at the Blue Water Bridge. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.